Hello everyone, Rimea here. Just like many of you presumably have, I played through Super Mario 3D World again recently. There are many aspects of this fantastic platformer which I believe are worth analysing, from how it bridges the gap between 2D and 3D Mario design, to the way in which the different characters' attributes enhance different styles of play. But in terms of level design, one thing really stands out most to me. The level design of Bowser's castles. So, what do I mean by this? Well, in this video I will be analysing the 3 stages of Super Mario 3D World which feature a Bowser fight at the end. Specifically because I noticed they each follow a different level design philosophy. These levels are World 1-Castle, Bowser's Highway Showdown, World Castle-Castle, what kind of a level name is that? Bowser's Lava Lake Keep, and World Bowser-Castle, the Great Tower of Bowser World. Each of these levels features a platforming section with some enemies and obstacles first, and then a showdown with Bowser at the end of it. Let's get going and analyse World 1-Castle, Bowser's Highway Showdown. Out of the 3 stages I discussed in this video, this one is designed the most traditionally. If you're not aware, traditional Mario design, particularly in the 2D games but also in Super Mario 3D World, goes something along the lines of first a central mechanic is introduced, then a side mechanic is introduced, the central mechanic is then expanded upon and used in combination with the side mechanic, some of the collectibles require you to take full advantage of the central mechanic, and then finally the central mechanic is used one last time just before the end of the level. And sure enough, playing through 1-Castle, this design system is followed almost exactly. Right away, entering the stage, the central mechanic is directly in front of you. These football bombs, let's call them foot bombs. Given that they don't feature any spikes and don't move around, I think most players will simply run into these balls to see what happens. And then, as you hit the foot bomb closest to you, not only does it suddenly pop out spikes and start glowing the way a bubble bomb does, but it most likely bounces right into this Goomba tower, killing the foes. This is about as natural as teaching a new mechanic to the player can get. So then you might be inclined to take another shot at kicking a foot bomb, and if you pay close attention when doing so, this one even reveals a little secret. A nice detail I love about Super Mario 3D World above many other Mario games is that the invisible item blocks featured in many Mario games are not quite as invisible in this one. And thus, this second foot bomb you hit reveals such a block, a nice albeit minor reward for curiosity and attention. As you get somewhat close to it, this foot bomb launcher starts activating. The way in which the invisible question block distracts you might also have been a way to make sure you don't get caught off guard by this happening, since the foot bombs ejected out of the launcher don't even come close to you here. This launcher also teaches you that the foot bombs don't simply turn red and spiky once you hit them, but will also do so after rolling a short distance, something to keep in mind for later. This green star coin section is really quite simple, though I do like the way in which it forces the player to have to dodge the incoming foot bombs launched from a second launcher, particularly since it's so far away that the foot bombs have turned spiky by the time they reach the player. This launcher also serves to make it a bit more difficult for the player to receive their first power-up in the stage. But okay, I think you're getting the point now. This stage is designed very traditionally, especially in the way it introduces mechanics. Rushing through the rest of it, there are a few more things of note. For example, I like how for this stamp you're forced to kick the foot bomb at an unusual angle, something which the game hasn't really taught the player yet, and thus it's rewarding to figure out. This final green star requires a similar action, however now the target is a lot harder to hit because it's actively chasing you and also might take a few hits. And it isn't until the end of the stage that the game pretty much requires you to use the foot bombs to progress. If you haven't learned how to by now, you might just get in trouble because the boss fight you're about to face really requires you to get the hang of this. Speaking of which, time to talk about that Highway Showdown. So yeah, for whatever reason, Nintendo decided it'd be cool for Bowser to have a car in this game. Either way, it certainly makes for a unique boss fight. If you've been following along closely, you might have just noticed the preceding section of this stage was all about these foot bombs, and sure enough, so is this boss fight. It's honestly a pretty simple fight. Bowser simply drives his car backwards, somehow, and in the meantime keeps throwing these foot bombs at you, which you can then of course hit right back at him. I like how Bowser doesn't just throw the foot bombs at you straight either, sometimes they come at you from a weird angle and you yourself have to readjust your walk to aim at Bowser. Also, the fact that the foot bombs turn spiky plays a bit of a role here, as you can't hit them from too far back because of this. As the fight progresses, the highway might change up a bit from time to time, but generally it's quite a repetitive loop of a boss fight. However, towards the end of it, not only do the Goomba stacks from the previous section make their glorious return, but we're also introduced to a mechanic which we'll be seeing more of later in this video, that being these fireballs, Bowser spits, which leave a puddle of lava, I presume. I like how it takes a full 9 hits to defeat even the easiest of Bowser boss fights in this game. Sure, it might mean the fight drags on a bit, but it's also a nice change of pace from the typical 3-hit boss fights seen in most Mario games, including this one actually. But yeah, there we go. After defeating Bowser, all that's left is this gold ball section, which is pretty much copy-pasted after every boss fight in this game, and that concludes One Lash Castle. Now it's time to move on to discussing a stage which is designed very differently. Castle, Bowser's Lava Lake Keep. This stage starts off with some Pudaboos, then you face off against a Boomerang Bro, then another set of Pudaboos and Boomerang Bros, one of which supplies you with a Boomerang suit which you might want to keep. After a somewhat precarious Green Star and a rotating Firebar, the player ends up in this section containing a few of these enemies, apparently they're called Flopters, and the return of the foot bomb launchers. You can kick a foot bomb into this destroyable set of blocks here, which then allows you to hit a P-switch lowering this bridge. After that, you can access this section with these Kathunks, that's what they're called, yes, a Fire Bro, another few foot bomb launchers, then another Kathunk and a Fire Bro before you get to the midway flag. Then there's another Firebar, a bunch of Pudaboos, another Flopter, and a Green Star which requires you to have kept that Boomerang suit all throughout the stage, another load of Pudaboos, and then a hidden Boomerang Flower. Then to end off this section of the stage, there is this set of 2 Hammer Bros and Kathunks. Once you murder the Hammer Bros, a bridge rises up, giving you access to the Bowser battle. Okay, so before we talk about that battle, I should probably address something. Did this level's designer have a stroke? I mean, why are there so many bloody mechanics all crammed into quite a small 2/3 of a stage? Believe it or not, there was actually quite some sense to be made out of this seeming mess of a stage. See, when the player first plays this stage, they'll most likely expect this to be the final castle, and thus this stage is not really a build-up of new mechanics, but rather a final test of sorts featuring enemies and other mechanics from every other castle stage preceding this one. What do I mean by that? Well, let's go through it. The Pudaboos, well, those are first seen in Full Lash Castle. The Boomerang Bros, well, they're a bit more complicated. See, it's not like any other castle stage in the game so far has featured Boomerang Bros. However, 3-Dash Castle features Fire Bros, then 6-Dash Castle features both Fire and Hammer Bros, so now it only makes sense that this stage would feature Boomerang, Fire, and Hammer Bros. There's a few of these rotating Firebars in this stage. These aren't in any of the other castles either, however they did appear in the first stage of this world, and so it works out I suppose. These Flopter enemies are from 3-Dash Castle, of course the foot bombs are from 1-Dash Castle, and the Kathunks are from 5-Dash Castle. Okay, now before we move on to the Bowser fight, I'd like to point out a few more specific things in this stage which I find interesting. First of all, I believe the fact that this stage doesn't have a central mechanic really made this level's designer struggle with the collectibles. The first Green Star is this random wall jump thing that has nothing to do with anything really. The stamp is quite simply hidden up here. Then the second Green Star is hidden all the way up above this bridge, meaning you have to use a catsuit, which isn't even given to the player in this stage. And then the final Green Star is this super simple Boomerang Flower thing. In terms of specific design decisions, this stage really doesn't have much. The only noteworthy and kind of clever thing it does is putting an item box with a bunch of coins here, meaning the player has to avoid these foot bombs in order to get the coins if they want them. Anyways, about that Bowser fight. Yeah, they did the classic 3D Mario thing and recycled an earlier Bowser fight, but now slightly harder. This increased difficulty comes in 3 forms. Bowser now uses his Fire Breath all throughout the fight, meaning he also throws the foot bombs less frequently. Occasionally the ground has some of these spike things on it, which sure enough are another returning mechanic since these first appeared in 2-Dash Castle. And sometimes the terrain features a few of these lava geysers, which actually appeared in the stage preceding this one, and so it kinda makes sense. Apart from that, and a few aesthetic differences, the fight is largely the same. It once again takes 9 hits to defeat Bowser, and then, after spoilers I guess, he returns, it's on to World 8, and for us the final stage of this video. World Bowser - Castle, the Great Tower of Bowser World. Whereas the previous 2 stages I've discussed were 2/3 a normal stage with the final third being a boss fight, this stage switches up that division, meaning most of this stage is taken up by the final Bowser fight. You start off with this platform which moves along a track when you stand on it. I like how this volcano in the back here erupts as you approach this area, building up the tension. That same volcano also causes the main mechanic for this small section, which is these fireballs raining down, leaving puddles of lava behind, the same way Bowser's fireballs do during the boss fights. Apart from those, and a few fire bros, and a simple green star, this section has nothing to offer really. Interestingly, not even a power-up is provided, presumably to ramp up the difficulty. The next section starts off with some cat Goombas. I think there are 2 possible reasons for their inclusion in this stage. Either it's simply a reference to the very first stage, which also includes them, or it's foreshadowing Meowser later on in this stage and reminding the player that cat variations of enemies are a thing to begin with. Speaking of foreshadowing, I like how the main 3 set pieces of this stage, the volcano, the Ferris wheel, and the tower, are each also on the map, which really solidifies the feeling of finality. After the stage finally supplies you with a power-up, you end up in that Ferris wheel section I mentioned, where knocking off all of these bullies gets you the second green star. I do feel like the way they shrank down the Ferris wheel from the map to this relatively small, simple, rotating platform is a bit of a missed opportunity. It would have been much cooler if it had been closer to its original size and generally a more involved section. By the way, what are the bullies doing in this stage? Well, I'm not too sure. They were featured in a stage like a world and a half before this one, but honestly I think they were simply included because the level's designer wanted to make this bully knockout section on the Ferris wheel a thing. And then, after Captain Toad presumably wishes you good luck, it's on to the final boss fight. That boss fight itself is honestly not all that noteworthy in terms of level design, in my opinion at least. Bowser becomes a furry, he goes up and down destroying some platforms as you slowly move up this tower, there's a simple green star coin section, and then you're up to first half. Then Bowser perches atop a power block, very smart move there buddy, and starts breathing fire again, which now for whatever reason is pink. This, I suppose, is the final evolution of the fireball mechanic, which was introduced all the way back in the first Bowser fight, and also showed back up at the beginning of this stage. As you shoot up towards a surprisingly late midway flag, it is implied that Bowser uses a bunch of double cherries. This midway section once again contains these cat Goombas. I'm pretty sure these ones are only here to easily give the player a catsuit. And after that is another vertical section where Bowser climbs up and down as you slowly make your way up the tower, only this time there are a few clones that break away some walls and attempt to hit the player. This section also includes these trapezes, which I suppose fit nicely with the platform seen throughout the stage, and also the general Bowser World theme, but really don't serve that much of a mechanical purpose. A minor nitpick here, most of the things that Bowser does using the game's power-ups in this stage is stuff the player can also do, so why is it that he uses a tail attack as if he's equipped a Tanuki suit or something, since this is an ability the player doesn't have with a cat suit, it just feels out of place. Anyways, then the final section of this stage has you climbing to the top of the tower as more and more Bowsers approach from all sorts of directions. The main Bowser's fire color is blue here. I suppose this was done to give a reason why his fire doesn't stick around like the pink fire does, but it does seem like an odd last minute addition. Anyways, you can hit this power block 3 times and Bowser's dead. Funnily enough, though the power block shrinks as you hit it, its hitbox stays the same, meaning you're essentially hitting air. Though I suppose in the utter chaos that is this final section, most people don't notice. I like how once you defeat Bowser, everything becomes very serene, the background becomes very bright, and the music is nice and calming. I also like how the last stamp is just given to the player, and how it is placed above one of these super bell trees, presumably another reference to the game's first stage. And yeah, that's it for the Great Tower of Bowser World. Even as I am saying these very words, I'm not sure what to make of this stage mechanically really. Unlike the 2 other stages, which quite clearly had a solid design philosophy, this stage kinda seems all over the place. There is some mechanical progression with the fireballs and the increasing Bowser chaos. There are a few mechanics arbitrarily taken from other stages, such as the bullies and the trapezes. But as a whole, I think the level's designer simply decided to sacrifice some good level design for the spectacle of the boss fight as a whole, which I suppose was a worthy trade-off. After all, unlike a lot of other 3D Mario games, Super Mario 3D World has an actually entirely unique and surprising final boss fight. So, all in all, Super Mario 3D World's 3 Bowser's castles show a whole spectrum of linear Mario design. World 1's castle shows traditional mechanical progression at its finest. World Castle's castle is more of a culmination of all the other castle stages preceding it, giving it a nice sense of finality despite it not even being the final castle in the game. And then World Bowser's castle is like a weird mix of both with an impressive boss fight added on top. Each stage is designed very differently, and yet each fits Super Mario 3D World like a glove. Anyways guys, that's gonna do it for this video. It took me a while to put this one together, so I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, I would really appreciate it if you liked this video and consider subscribing to the channel as well. I'm planning on making many more videos in this format in the future, so I hope you look forward to that. Thanks for watching, and bye!